Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Food is Our Right, the struggle for equitable food systems open dialogue in celebration of the World Food Day, today, October 16. This dialogue is co-hosted by three organizations: the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, plus University of the Western Cape, the Center for Excellence in Food Security, and the C19 People's Coalition's Food Working Group. The two key concepts for today are right to food and equitable, fair, democratic food systems. For those who are on Twitter, the hashtags for this event are hashtag World Food Day, hashtag WFD 2020, hashtag African Food Systems, and hashtag Right to Food. Also, to let everyone know that we are interacting on Zoom, live streaming on Facebook, and this dialogue will be uploaded afterwards on YouTube. While the world is facing a major pandemic crisis, several millions of people across the world suffer from hunger and malnutrition, despite the fact that more than enough food is produced to feed the global population today. How to explain this contradiction? What is the state of the right to food globally? What experiences are out there in the world to inspire the subversion of an increasingly exclusionary global food regime? How can we build people-centered food systems that will end hunger and malnutrition? To debate on these and other questions, we are honored to have with us today voices of activists, academics, and practitioners from around the globe, from Africa and South Africa. In this first block, we will start by looking at the global perspective to understand the macro forces that move the world of food and agriculture and learn from world experiences. We are privileged to have in this block two outstanding speakers who I welcome, Sofia Monsalve and Sagari Ramdas. Sofia Monsalve Suarez is the Secretary General of FIAN International, a human rights organization working for the right to food and nutrition. Sofia's long work experience includes field research visits and fact-finding missions in 20 countries. She had a close collaboration with peasants, family farmers, landless people, fisher folks, indigenous people, rural workers, organized in the International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, IPC. She also has an extensive experience collaborating with the UN agencies working on food and agriculture, as well as coordinating civil society participation to various processes of the UN Committee on Food Security, on World Food Security, CFS. Our second speaker is Sagari Ramdas, a veterinary scientist, and member of the Food Sovereignty Alliance India, Sagari heads the popular education program at the Kudali Intergenerational Learning Center in Telangana. She designs and facilitates transformative popular education processes for social justice, food sovereignty, and Buen Vivir with Bahujan and Adivasi youth. Through the Alliance, she works closely with pastoral, Adivasi, and other small and marginal farming communities organizing for their livelihoods. My name is Boaventura Monjane. I will be your chair for this first block. I'm a journalist and scholar activist from Mozambique, and I'm currently based at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, plus as a postdoctoral candidate. I will ask our guests to speak for no more than 7 minutes so that we can allow a lively participation from the audience. I pass over to you, Sofia. Compañera, adelante.
Gracias, Boa, and good day to everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be with you here at this invitation by PLAS. Thank you very much, Ruth and Boa, for the invitation. Yes, Moniba told me I should deliver 3 messages in these 7 minutes, and I want to start giving this international perspective from the perspective of FIAN International and the work that we do. We have national sections in about 20 countries, and what I want to tell to you now is what we have been doing in the past months after the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. And I think one of the major developments there, I think, is a contradictory development, what we see now. On the one hand, we see massive regressive measures in terms of the protection of the right to food in countries like India or Brazil, who used to be the model countries in terms of implementing a human rights-based approach to food security. So this is very worrying because, for instance, I'm sure Zagari will tell you much better than me about India, so I will leave out India. But similar developments, like, for instance, dismantling of environmental protection is happening in countries like Brazil, Colombia, or even in the US. Right now we have an action against the omnibus law in Indonesia, because the Indonesian government passed recently a law which is overruling environmental protections, the relaxation also of imported food in Indonesia, as well as facilitating land grabbing and the conversion of agricultural land into the national strategic projects. So we see these kind of measures also relating, for instance, to school meals in Brazil. Recently, we had also an action, let's say, demanding from the Supreme Court in Brazil the protection of the right to food, because the Supreme Court was undoing the ruling of a lower court, which was obliging the state of Rio de Janeiro to provide for the school meals of the students. Of course, now with the lockdown, many schools are closed and the students are not able to have access to that daily meals. And this is really one of the largest problems of the right to food violations that we are seeing. So regressive measures, I think, is a very, very problematic development, and the recovery measures are not going in the right direction, because they are prioritizing agribusiness, big retailing, our corporations, and they are ignoring, yet again, peasant farming and small-scale food producers. So we have documented this in a detailed manner, for instance, in Ecuador, where peasants are lacking, for instance, enough access to seeds and seedlings for the next agricultural season. So discriminatory responses is a big problem. And what we have seen is rather the acceleration of, I think, developments which were already there before the pandemic, as, for instance, the financialization of land and of natural resources. And at the same time, I think digitalization has accelerated also a lot. For instance, if you see in different countries, of course, because of the lockdowns, we were not allowed to move, online food delivery is really a big thing in many countries. And I think this process of digitalization of the entire food systems is on the way, is still not very clear how is it unfolding, but it's for sure very worrying, because it threatens to even concentrate much more the existing food systems. I said it is a contradictory development because, as I'm mentioning these very worrying trends, I forgot to add one, and it is the increase in repression and criminalization of people protesting for the structure, against the structural drivers of dispossession and environmental destruction. And I think in my country, my home country, Colombia, the pandemic basically has been used to bring back war in the country and to kill every day, every week. There are killings of social leaders, peasant leaders. And I think this is terrible. I'm sure Zagari will tell us also very bad stories from India as well in that regard. Philippines, Honduras, Mexico is really a very, very worrying development in terms of repression and criminalization. But it is contradictory because as we see that, we also see people's responses from below in order to really be able to ensure access to food for those most in need of food. And I think, I guess in South Africa, you also have very, very good examples of people, how people are organizing, for instance, peasant cooperatives in Brazil or indigenous producers in Colombia are organizing to bring food to the informal workers who were rendered jobless during the pandemic in cities, in informal settlements in cities. And this is popping up, as mushrooming in many countries, and it's really very exciting because it's showing it's possible to reshape food systems based on solidarity and based on around an understanding that food is a right and not a commodity, and that food systems are actually public goods, and that we need to reshape them in such a way. So I think this is very important. Now, since I just have a couple of minutes left, let me turn now to more the international global perspective, because as Boa mentioned, my organization has been involved in several international processes. And I have to tell you that it is very disquieting what is happening at the international level, and perhaps this is my second message. There is an increasing alienation between what's going on the ground and what's going on at this global level. It was always, of course, a sort of alienation there. It's very difficult, but now it's really almost impossible. I think social movements who used to be very strong in some of these fora, like for instance, the UN Committee on World Food Security, basically are so overwhelmed, are so busy with the realities on the ground that it is very difficult to follow all these Zoom meetings at the international level. So it's becoming a sort of TV multilateralism, which is not anymore a multilateralism, right? Because right now, basically in this fora and for this intergovernmental negotiation is only exporting countries and of course industrialized countries speaking. And we see an extreme penetration of corporations or corporate capture. You probably heard last year that the World Economic Forum signed an agreement with the UN for a special partnership. And now, for instance, that we are preparing for this UN Food System Summit, the World Economic Forum is a very important actor behind the scenes. And you know very well that the special envoy of the UN Secretary General is Mrs. Agnes Kalibata, the president of the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. So, this is not new, but I think the pandemic has accelerated this development. And therefore, we are very concerned that some of the gains that we had in terms of democratizing decision-making at global level are about to be undone. And I think this summit is a big threat to people's sovereignty, to exercising people's sovereignty, because as I said, is extremely biased. The setting of the summit is extremely biased in favor of a pro-business, pro-corporate agenda. Yes, perhaps a last remark in terms of the food systems framing. I think as food sovereignty movement, we need probably to reflect more, to be very careful whether a food systems framing eventually well, how it goes together with a food sovereignty framing and also with a human rights framing, because it changes the perspective. All actors are treated as if I think we are developing an understanding of a human rights based food system, but I think we are in the early stages. And I think it would be interesting also to reflect to what extent a food sovereignty framing goes well with a food systems framing. I think what it is good about the food systems framing is that it goes from the care perspective, you know, from food, cooking, and of course feeding children, feeding the elderly, and so on. And of course it brings issues of exploitation of women to the front. It's possible to do that. Production, distribution, and so on and so forth. But what it is a bit worrying is the food systems perspective tends to ignore power differentials. And I think this is this is a question to discuss more. So I think my time is up. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Sagari, what is the story from India? You work as a popular educator with, among other groups, rural producers, especially women. What is the story from there? You want to unmute, Sagari?
Yeah. Thank you, and solidarity greetings from the Alliance to all of you. This is an extremely important conversation, and thank you for having me over here to be part of this extremely important occasion. So what is very clear is that the pandemic didn't create the food crisis, but it brought into sharp focus with crystal clarity the depth of injustice and inequality of the global food system. And undoubtedly, it has deepened and expanded hunger and food insecurity, particularly in India, but as is borne out by figures, and I'm not going to, we can research those, you can find them on the web. But the issue and the question is who suffered? And that's where when we look at India, it was the vast swath of landless populations in India, the landless citizens, 58%, 495 million landless citizens of India, who depend today completely on their labor as daily wage earners, either in the agriculture sector, in the rural, or having to leave their villages and come to the urban and working in the most insecure regions like domestic workers, security guards, construction workers, and their work stopped, and they were the ones who suffered and continued to suffer. But the landlessness is not a faceless landlessness. It has a face, and that face is Dalit landlessness. It's driven by India's caste system, the most ancient structure of oppression, exploitation, marked by its continuing dehumanized practice of untouchability. And the Dalits have continued and continue to experience this form and practice of untouchability, which today and earlier has dispossessed them from their land and continues to deny them access to land. So 20% of the population today owns merely 9% of the land. Some 5% of the population today owns nearly 30 to 40% of the land. And Dalits contribute the maximum in terms of between 70 to 80% of the Dalit population are the agriculture workers. And when coming to the indigenous peoples of India, the Adivasis, their threats of landlessness are different. Their threats are because their lands, despite constitutional protections which the Indian state provides, their lands are where we find the mine. The lands are where the state wants to mine, the state wants to dam, the state wants the forest for carbon trade, the state wants the forest to commodify the territory of Adivasis. And that's the threat to their, and why Adivasis, indigenous people, get dispossessed of their land. And it is this landless agriculture labor, particularly Dalit women and Dalit agriculture labor, alienated, exploited, extracted, which is today subsidizing and providing the profits which today is being accumulated and accumulated by the corporate sector, which today is really in control of the food farming systems in India, right down the value chain. Look at production, look at procurement, look at distribution. It's the corporate food system which is calling the shots. And this has not happened in a vacuum. Political governance, political decisions taken by various governments, starting from the early 70s, where the green revolution in plants, the green revolution, then we had the white revolution in milk, then in the 90s, we had the blue revolution in fisheries, and today we talk about a green revolution, which is essentially pushing GMO technology. This technology has come in and hegemonized and marginalized the knowledge which Dalit and Adivasi women possess of being able to sustain resilient, resistant food systems from generation to generation. That knowledge is once again only desired because it can be commodified. Pre-90s, we had still a commitment to a universal public distribution system which provided food to all. We also had a commitment for public procurement of food grains from farmers, which the state then purchased. But here again, a caveat. The farmers in India is not a homogeneous, essentialized category. The 80 to 90% marginal smallholders once again belong to the subjugated castes, what we say are Dalit and OBC, other backward castes. Bo used the word Bahujan. Bahujan refers to all these communities. And today it's the middle and rich farmers who once again are the dominant caste. They benefited both pre-1990, post-1990, once India committed to economic liberalization. What did it do? It has embraced capitalist systems of food systems overwhelmingly. The pressures of IMF, World Bank, WTO, we didn't resist it. We just embraced it. Our political governance, the decision makers embraced it and have brought in policies which today has enabled the entire capture of the system, right down to the kinds of policies we have today. So one of them is the public distribution system of food is a targeted system. It's not universal. They have stopped procurement and commitments to procure grain from farmers, though they announce minimum support prices. So it's useless. Right down to in the period of the lockdown, we have had 3 farm bills passed, all of which have actually only served to legalize and consolidate the concentration of the food farming system in the hands of capitalist corporate agribusiness. And in the same process, dispossess small marginal farmers and citizens, pushing them out from the means of production, whether it is food or whether it is millets or whether it is milk. And therefore, and finally, you have a situation, people are only left with their animals, grazing on common lands. But even that, as we heard from Sofia, the system is the same in India. The commodification of the land markets today, right? And the digitalization to aggressively enhance this. Therefore, even the commitments of land reforms are no longer commitments because it's all about capital can only raise more capital if they have land. So in this same period, because of the kind of dispossession, because of the kind of starvation that has unfolded, social movements rallied around through the Right to Food campaign, culminating in our Right to Food Security Act. A very nice act. But the question really is, my friends, that today when the entire system, the government has simultaneously facilitated the takeover and the capture of the system by agribusiness, then who today is going to provide you that food? Is it small marginal farmers? No. The small marginal farmers are being pushed out of their livelihoods, have no agency or control any longer of producing the food and defining the food system. So it is going to be meeting your food through private actors, through agribusiness, through corporations. And our fascist governments, yes, we are today in a situation where fascist governments are really controlling and playing the shots. They have facilitating also in the name of people's institutions. So we have cooperatives who today, for instance, there's a dairy cooperative in India called Amul. They are a monopoly. They have enhanced their growth. Their revenues have increased by 15%. They have pushed out small little producers of dairy farmers and little markets across India. And all of this again facilitated by the state. So if there's been growth, it's because the state has facilitated those actors whose interests are being served. Finally, therefore, what does it mean in terms of resistance and counter-organizing? Coming to the Alliance and other such movements, where our vision of food justice, sovereignty, and Buen Vivir, the membership base of our organizing are the Dalit, Adivasi, Indigenous, Bahujan communities. Why? Because they are the landless. They are the ones who are being marginalized. Young people today, products of liberalization, also first-generation learners, struggling to get into the elite institutions which have been again dominated by caste. They are the ones, through popular education as our mandate, who are leading critical reflection of communities to critically analyze where are our roots of our oppression? Why are we trapped into debt? And through that, and we have found it is only through that process of praxis, of reflection and action that you come up with radical, very radical collective actions to take back control over the system. What does that mean? Whether it's organizing for land, whether it is a recognition that you have to go back to sharing labor as a basis for transiting now again from food, from commodity production back to food production, because that's what all this liberalization capitalist system has done. whether it has been youth coming back and doing collective and community farming, saving your seeds and breeds, or starting decentralized, localized markets, which are linking again, as you said, consumers and producers. In the time of this pandemic, that's what really saved the day, people sharing their produce with one another. At the end of the day, what we are finding is that, particularly in this moment of fascist regimes, if we have to take back control over our food system, it is about this continuous organizing and assertion towards this vision of food sovereignty. Without this praxis of reflection and conscientization, we are finding there is no other way to resist but this. Thank you, Boa.
Thank you very much, Sophia and Sagari. The picture you are painting is very scary and ugly, but the good news is that, as you also say, there is resistance, there is organizing, and you know, Sophia said, food is a right, it's not a commodity. We have few minutes left before we close this block to go to the African perspectives, but I would like to hear from our audience, you know, strong kind of, you know, take the floor, say something. How do you see the issue? I would like to invite Professor Georgie Sikata. I'm not sure if she's with us today, but if not, anyone feel free to just you know, unmute yourself and speak. Well, if not, since we still have a few minutes for the global perspective, I will give 1 minute to Sophia to wrap up and 1 minute to Sagari to wrap up. I was hoping that we would have someone to kind of also share experience or analysis. I don't see any sign of anyone. So Sophia, wrap up, Sagari, wrap up, 1 minute each, and then we go to the African perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Boa. Perhaps one of the things on the way forward at the global level or international level is, I think we have to review the ways we have been organizing because they are probably a little bit outdated by now, or if you want, dysfunctional, because the systemic crisis is so big that we need to overcome a little bit the silos or the fragmentation that we ourselves also, let's say, replicated because we were organized a little bit in silos. So what I'm saying now is that it's going to be very difficult for us as food sovereignty movement without understanding issues, for instance, of economic justice or tax justice and finances. If we don't stop financialization, it's going to be very difficult to defend the land and to defend our autonomy over our food systems, territorialized and localized food systems. So the big question is, how do we now organize? And I think the financial question is just one question. And I think the debt this week, it was also the week of the action about debt. And I think it's a very important agenda that we need to embrace much more powerfully. And I think there is also the issue, of course, climate justice is a big issue. Probably we are have made much more progress in terms of food sovereignty movement and climate justice movement to come together. And I think the feminist struggles are also very important and are leading the way in many countries and probably also in many of these domains. So we need to reinforce the feminist struggle inside the food sovereignty movement. Is there? But in some of our movements and configurations, we have still some homework to do in order to really embrace a radical feminist agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Boa. I think that one of the, particularly in a, India is like multiple nations and countries. I think one of the things we have to recognize is that unless one really sharpens the organizing around the structures of oppression and violence, as I just outlined, it becomes very easy and really it doesn't move your movement forward or move and advance your agenda. by just framing it as a farmers' food sovereignty movement. And that for us is very, very clear in an Indian context. Whether the questions of caste or race or gender, I think that today, particularly today, that the pandemic brought this out so sharply that we have to move towards sharpening that organizing. Otherwise, it is not going to, your internal contradictions, we have, I think, to suppress internal contradictions within a movement, within the larger concerns of food and farming, is something which is going to really backfire. It is not going to advance any kind of gains for the most oppressed. And I would like to say that this is probably holds true for every country. There is a caste system in every country. There is a hierarchy and a hierarchy of power in every country. We cannot any longer look at women as a category. We cannot any longer look at farmers as a category. We cannot be, in India, we have a tendency just because and there's an internal contradiction. On one hand, we have capitalist formations who equally want to expand into other countries and oppress farmers there, oppress small farmers there. So we have to be able to really look and break out and look at this entire picture, because the food system is no longer just a domestic versus international. You have actors in your own country that unless we map out and really identify who are your enemies, who are the ones who are most oppressed, our movement is really going to just remain where stagnated. And I think that for me is my final point, that unless we really go back to that local levels of organizing and gradually taking back control and resisting, today just placing our demands to a fascist government, that fascist government is very clear where its agenda is going. So we need to be clear about where our agenda.
Sure,
yeah.
We need to be clear about what is our agenda. Thank you, Sofia Monsalve and Sagari Ramdas, for your inputs and contributions. I then close this block and I hand over to Professor Moniba Isaacs to take us to the second block. Over to you, Moniba.
Thank you, Boa. Thank you, Sofia and Sagari, for your presentations. It was really interesting to hear the global perspectives. As Boa mentioned, the session is basically looking at the struggle for equitable food systems, and the struggle for equitable food systems is particularly focused on civil society movements, and we've got 3 exciting speakers lined up. We've got first our speaker from Ghana. I just want to make sure, Ruth and Boa, can you please see if you can get Edithrudith Lukanga in? She's trying to get, she's also a speaker in the session. I've been trying to get her in somehow, something with the registration. So if anybody can please help, she's a speaker in the session and she's waiting to be part of the session. So yes, we've got 3 speakers. One of our first speaker is Patricia Blankson Akapu from she's part of a women's movement in Ghana, and her career objective is to promote gender, social and economic justice for women. She's got an MA in development studies, and she's the program manager of a NetRight, which is a network for women's rights and in Ghana, and she's also part of a civil society partner of PLUS in the political economy of the African food system. So she's our civil society partner lead in Ghana. Then we have our second speaker is Joe Mzinga. He is from ESSA, and I will introduce Joe when he speaks. But I think to get the flow of the discussion, I do think that the issue of the food system and the power of the food system is one thing that Sofia mentioned, that I think it is important that for the project that we are launching and we are busy with, we are trying to put power at the center of the food system and also to look at the vulnerable and the marginalized women. And Patricia leading the network for women's rights in Ghana called NetRight. Patricia, if you can unmute yourself, and then you can have your 7 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Moniba. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate all farmers, especially rural women farmers, on this World Food Day for their hard work and resilience. My 17 minutes will look at the struggles of women farmers and as traders in this pandemic, and how best what can be done to transform our food system and to ensure right to food. The pandemic poses a threat, continues to pose a threat to the livelihoods of especially women in economic activities as farmers, processors, traders, and fishers, among other things. And for Ghana, we recorded our first case on March 12. And the responses that our government put in place, because there were no broader consultations, the responses that government put in place had accessibility challenges, especially for the poor, vulnerable groups, and mostly for our informal economy, because they were not able to take advantage of, for example, some of the stimulus packages that were put in place to ensure that small businesses, for instance, were able to stand on their feet during the pandemic. Our responses as a country also had some implications for our food system in general, because it had disruption in food distribution, which resulted in food price hikes, especially in the urban areas, while in rural producing regions, and perishable crops were left to rot, because some of the measures that were put in place had its consequences on especially rural women farmers that were bringing their products to the urban cities. Agriculture over the past years has been underfunded, and most African countries, including Ghana, they are not paying much attention to the devastating effects of the COVID pandemic, which is causing to the agricultural production sector, and this is likely to affect the right to food. For instance, in Ghana, about 70% of our population depend directly or indirectly on farm produce for survival. And in this pandemic, smallholder farmers not only are faced with the issue about inconsistent rainfall pattern, but also the indirect consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as the reduction in markets for their produce and absence of labor and the lack of available agro inputs and extension services. But I also have to point out that in spite of these challenges, the Ghana Statistical Service has indicated that in the second quarter, the agricultural sector grew by 2.5%, while the rest, industry and services sectors, dropped. Now let's look at some of the measures that were put up as a country and the implications that it had on our women farmers, women fishers, and other traders and all that. The partial lockdown, for instance, happened in certain urban certain cities, and the announcement was made on a Sunday evening, where most of our traders, especially rural women that are coming from the rural areas to the cities to sell their produce, and women fishers that are bringing either smoked fish or fresh fish into the city centers to sell, they do that at dawn. And the announcement was made in the evening of a Sunday, and they were ready to bring their produce on Monday at dawn, only to get to the police barriers and were asked to return and back home. And this had a lot of implications because for especially those who were selling perishable farm produce, it got rotten because they had to take it back. They were not able to access, access the markets to be able to sell their produce. Other things, there were also disruption of input supply and extension services because of the lockout, people's movements were also curtailed. So there was a disruption in that. And food and transporting food from one place to the other became a huge problem because during the partial lockdown, one of the things that happened was that there were no intercity travel. So you can't move from one region to the other. You can move within your own, the region that you are. So that also affected even how to transport goods from the rural areas to the urban cities to sell. And one other thing was that there was also social distancing, and with the social distancing, transporters were made to reduce the number of passengers. And obviously this resulted in the increase of transport fares, which also had its own issues. In terms of fishing activities also came to a halt because they were not able to then also to embark on their fishing activities. The closure of markets, social distancing, and all that had its implications. For instance, with the closure of the borders, when you look at fishermen, for instance, in the when they are fishing, they go across border, and especially for those that are close to border towns, they have cross-border trade, so they move from one end to the other. But because there was border closure, then it also affected even the fish that they had to catch because they were able to only fish within Ghana waters and were not able to move freely to, for instance, Ivory Coast, where they could do that, or Togo or other areas.
Patricia, it's very difficult for me to cut you down when you start speaking about fisheries. It almost goes again. But can you wrap up, please? Because we have two other speakers in the session, and we've got. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So all this had implications on women's livelihoods. It had implications on women farmers, how they are able to sell their produce, and there were no storage facilities even for them to keep this. So all this had different implications for women. And for Ghana, I think what we have to do as a nation is to revolutionize our agriculture to safeguard food and nutrition crisis, including prioritizing distribution and processing. And it's also important that there are special packages set up. For instance, stimulus packages, farmers, fishers, and other informal women workers were not able to access that. So there is the need to set up special packages for women that will be able to alleviate them from some of the hardships that they are enduring during this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for your detailed, sense of what is happening in terms of fishers and traders and the struggle for women. I'm going to go over to Ruth Hall number 2, which is Edithrudith. She's under Ruth Hall's name. Edithrudith, I just saw you now. Edithrudith, I see a name. She's here. She's from a meadow. If you can unmute yourself, Edithrudith, and immediately go into introducing yourself and please make your presentation so we don't waste time. Thank you.
Thank you, Moniba. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry for joining late. I've been struggling with joining. And I'm sorry to have missed all the previous sessions from the other speakers. So happy World Food Day, everyone. And it's really an honor for me to be part of this platform. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, based on your time zone. It's a privilege for me again to be part of this forum. And to begin, I would like to start by highlighting the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how also we'll move on to reflect on how it has impacted the food systems and especially how it has impacted the women in fisheries. So mine will mostly focus on fisheries, bringing fish in the food systems discussion. Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic that has spread rapidly and extensively around the world has profound implications for food security and nutrition. The unfolding crisis has affected food systems and threatened people's access to food via multiple dynamics. We have witnessed not only a major disruption to food supply chains in the wake of lockdowns that triggered global health crisis, but also major economic slowdowns. And these crises have resulted in lower incomes and higher prices of some foods, putting food such as fish out of reach for many and undermining the right to food and stalling efforts to meet Sustainable Development Goal, particularly Goal 2, Zero Hunger. So the situation is fluid and dynamic, characterized by high degree of uncertainty. According to the World Health Organization, the worst effects are yet to come. And most health analysts have predicted also that this virus will continue to circulate for at least 1 year or 2 more years. So for me, based on this background, I'm looking at the situation with respect to the struggles of women food producers, and particularly women fish workers in African context, highlighting the role of fish in the African food systems. Taking into consideration that most of the African fisheries is small scale. Small scale fishers and fish workers and their communities, and particularly women, face many challenges in maintaining their livelihoods and their contribution to food security, particularly in equitable access to resources, markets, to health, to education, and other social services. So COVID-19 crisis has exacerbated these vulnerabilities, and particularly for women. Alongside other major disruptions in food and trade, the impact of pandemic on fisheries is far from over. The restrictions on the movement of fishers and fish workers and the shortages of essential items has intensified hunger and malnutrition in most of the areas. And in most African countries, women, fish vendors, for example, and traders have frequently lost their livelihoods as markets are closed and the demand for fresh fish declined. The virus has also had other harmful impacts on women as the burdens of household work and domestic violence have reportedly increased during the lockdown. So to finish it off, the impact of COVID-19 in the food systems highlights the importance of integrating the universal right to food with the specific rights of fishing communities to their lives and livelihoods. It also reminds us on the importance and the connectedness between our food systems, health, sustainable development, and human rights, and the key role played by women. So as a strategy, I think working together, not working in silos, unifying our forces, unifying voices among women and other players is very important. And a good example from the African perspective, women fish workers have come together and to form this continental platform of women in small-scale fisheries, which is called African Women Fish Processors and Traders Network, AFISHNet. And I think this is a very unique platform, and it is an opportunity for women fish workers to unite, to amplify their voices, and underlining the critical role that women play in the sector. And therefore, when addressing the challenges, women should be in the forefront in making decisions, in acknowledging the fact that they are the ones who are mostly impacted, mostly affected, and therefore the solutions also should be designed to address the challenges that women face directly. So yeah, that
Thank you,
I think I should thank all those who have organized for this dialogue. Thank you so much, Muniba.
Thank you very much, Edithrudith, and thank you also for stepping into Nasir's shoes as he was not well today and be able to present. So I think that, you know, it is definitely, when we're talking about the African food system, we're talking about vulnerable women, we're talking about small scale, and to introduce our next speaker, who is Joseph, or we also know as Joe Mzinga. And he is the Regional Chief Executive Officer of the East African and Southern African Small Scale Farmers Forum. So we definitely have in the project that we are doing in Ghana, Tanzania, and South Africa, we definitely have a strong small scale, gendered, and we also need to unpack the issues of power. Joe, can you please give us perspectives from East and Southern Africa? Thank you. You've got 7 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Muniba. I think you can see my screen. I will try to speak to it, if you allow me. Can you see the slide?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I will be speaking. I'm told to speak about the struggles of smallholder farmers in East and Southern Africa. And I'm speaking from ISAF. ISAF is the regional smallholder farmer network, is working in East and Southern Africa. We are cutting across 6 countries in East Africa, but also in Southern Africa. But also we are part and parcel of the project. This is to do with research, but not only research, but research that might come out with ideas or policy issues in terms of lobbying and advocacy. So this project is hosted by the University of the Western Cape, but working with the Institute of Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, based in South Africa, and is working in 3 countries to explore in terms of the response of COVID-19 in the political economy of the African food system. South Africa, that is number 1, and then we have Tanzania and also Ghana. I will be speaking about the struggle of the smallholder farmers and the vision that we have for the African food system, because we see that the system is not working, and if the system is not working, it means that the system is perpetuating hunger, malnutrition, poverty, and inequality, as the previous speaker at the global level spoke about. So I have, yes, our theme is the foods in our rights and the struggle for equitable food system. So what we see that hunger is in rise, malnutrition is in the rise, poverty is in the rise, but also inequality is in the rise. So it means that something is not right. We need to fix it. And the COVID-19 really came out, like the previous speaker spoke, is about showing exactly how vulnerable the system that we have is perpetuating this situation, is even worse, so to speak. And we can see inequality is still at that highest level. We have women and the youth marginalized in terms of the access, utilization and ownership of the means of production. But we see very much the push for the so-called industrial agriculture that is using chemicals, and which is making agriculture to be very expensive. And for smallholder farmers, we can't afford, because agriculture is expensive. So as I said before, that according to the State of Food Security, the FAO report this year, this came out by the middle of this year, 690 million people are food insecure. But in Southern Africa, we have about 45 million reported in July, according to the reports. And Tanzania and Malawi, this year, we are not very much food insecure compared to other countries like South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, but also Zimbabwe. And this is because of one factor, that the climate really was on the side of the smallholder farmers. Once there is very small variation in terms of climate change, we are in trouble. So again, we see that around 3 and 10% of the population in Southern Africa, they have acute malnutrition, but also stunting in terms of our children, around 20 to 50% of the children. The DRC is around 40. Look what Burundi is around 50. Tanzania is around 35. And we are looking into the future, and this is the real situation that we have. So in conclusion, we are saying that the system is not working and we need the dismantled. And looking at the global framework that we have, and we as smallholders farmers are working in order to change them, is like the SDG. We have 10 years to go, but we can see in the last 2 years, hunger and poverty is on the rise. So we have to do something. In Africa, we have accepted the so-called Malabo Declaration. We have 7 goals, but still our government are not investing much. And even if they invest, there is no disbursement of the actual amounts. They are great in terms of putting aside 10% in the agriculture sector, but that is not the situation. So what is the opportunity? We say we need to improve the system, but also we need to democratize the current system that we have, maybe dismantle it. And we say the way to go is agroecology, because it's guaranteeing smallholder farmers in terms of ownership of land and seed. But really we have to find the patriarchal system and ensure that we are participating. Agroecology also is caring for the health, but agroecology, it showed even amid COVID that it can ensure healthy and nutritious food. So what are the actions that we want to see? Number one, we need to, farmers be at the heart of policy processes and budgets. It means that nothing for us without us. We want farmers to participate, and they have been pushing at different levels, starting from the regional level to the national level, pushing for farmers participating in policy processes and budget making. And number two, we want to see the visit of the rural and the peri-urban, because if you look at the food system, the producers are men and the consumers are men. And then at the middle, where in fact profit is for smallholder farmers, we have the middlemen. So we want to advocate for the visiting of the, and re-energize the rural development, which is quite forgotten, particularly within SADC, and also the peri-urban as centers of sustainable production and processing of foods. And within the same, in terms of the rural development, we want the formation of the rural producers in terms of the cooperative processing, but also we want to see clean energy infrastructure, road irrigation, health storage, but also ICT, because amid COVID-19, ICT is not a luxury, but a necessity even for smallholder farmers. And number three, we need to see extension that is supporting smallholder farmers. And number four, we want to see recognition of the right to food as the basic human rights. A lot of our constitution, our legal frameworks, they are not recognizing food as the rights, the basis of human rights. And lastly, we say our call for action, first of all, is the quantum change on the social, particularly on the patriarch system, but also changing, reorienting the current agriculture approach to agroecology. And number two, we want the policies to work. We don't want just to see good policies, but we want to see those policies are funded, looking at the SDG, looking at the African commitments and the national investment plan. But also we want to see the rural development strategy is revisited, including agroecology as a principle. And number four, last one, is in terms of organizing. We are working with different organizations all over the world. We're working the People's Coalition on Food Security, Food Sovereignty, sorry, to address those issues at the global level, but also other organizations that AFSA, also the women, rural women in Southern Africa, and so many other organizations moving forward. Over to you, Chair, my 7 minutes are over.
Thank you very much, Joe. Colleagues, participants, I'm so sorry. I think that, you know, somehow we needed to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the context of the movements in the continents and trying to get some dialogue going. But I'm afraid we are running out of time. And I would like all three speakers to kind of just articulate three key messages, and everybody on the call to think about what are the demands, the strategies, and next steps for this, so that we don't lose the essence of what is being presented. So if you can join the chat and you can just present, because we're going to hopefully come back the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes to speak about demand strategies and next steps. I still wanted to kind of say that it is important for social movements to also think about, you know, what is their theory of change? How do they look at, you know, forms of protest, forms of alliance, and then at the same time get a seat at the negotiation table? And that negotiation table is a compromise. And I think that is what I want to put, you know, or what we need to come back in the end. Where are we placed as civil society movements, as NGOs or CBOs, wherever we are based? I hand over to my vibrant colleague Nandi to take the South African part of this, and I'm also fully aware that my colleague has to run to another session, so if he can present. Thank you very much. I hand over to you, Nandi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So because we're running a bit late, I'm not going to do a full introduction of myself, but I will start off with an introduction of our first speaker, Julian May, who's a professor, Professor Julian May is the director of the DSI NRF Center of Excellence in Food Security, where he leads the Child Malnutrition in South Africa research program. An expert in applied poverty reduction assessment, Professor May has worked on options for poverty reduction, including land reform, social grants, information technology, and urban agriculture in Africa and the Indian Ocean Islands. He also holds the UNESCO chair in Africa Food Systems. Professor May, I'm going to hand over to you, even though we would have liked to start with the activists before getting the academic perspective. We are aware that you have other commitments today. Professor May.
Thank you for that, Nandi. And let me try and be an activist then to start. Ruth asked for three messages. The three which I'd like to put forward. The first is that when we confront vast inequalities, being able to manage food security becomes even more complex and even more difficult. And by vast inequalities, I mean of the nature that we have in South Africa, where we have tremendous inequalities of income, the most unequal country in the world, but also inequalities of assets, which other speakers have spoken about previously, as well as inequalities of information, and critically inequalities of transparency. So certainly among researchers, the very nature of peer review insists that our work is to be transparent and able to be reviewed by others. But in the case of the corporate power structures that were being spoken about earlier, transparency is very scarce, particularly in the food industry. So inequalities of that nature make it very difficult for us to respond to dealing with issues of food insecurity, and in particular when we're in a period of crisis. The COVID epidemic exposed exactly that, and that kind of crisis threw into light the changes that were going on without us necessarily being aware of them, and those that we need now to monitor. Many, I think, hope that COVID might bring about opportunities for small-scale production or for localized markets, but perhaps they may have, in fact, also opened up opportunities for even greater vertical integration of the food system in the food system. The second comment which I want to make is that we also need to recognize that food security does not equal nutrition security. And I think one of the things that we lost during the responses to COVID was the importance of not only providing people with enough calories, but ensuring that diets were adequate, and particularly diets are adequate for vulnerable groups. And here I have in mind unborn children, infants, mothers, and the elderly. So I think a lot of attention was focused on distributing typically quite inexpensive food, but also food that is unhealthy. So I think across the world, if you were to examine the food parcels, the contents you would find are highly processed foods, highly profitable foods to distribute, and not necessarily the foods that consumers actually would have benefited from eating. So that's my second statement. We need to be very careful, both in understanding the COVID, what happened during COVID, but in future crises that we face, to separate out when are we delivering sufficient calories, when are we dealing with basic food security, and what are we neglecting when it comes to nutrition security, and that includes the care component of nutrition security. The last strong statement which I wanted to make is to propose that we are facing a series of as yet unknown and invisible pandemics. And these are going to be the pandemics that have been initiated during the COVID lockdowns. Certainly the ones that I'm concerned about are those that are going to manifest in children. So here I think we're going to see children born during the COVID period to have been likely subject to some kind of nutritional insult during pregnancy. So this is where mothers had insufficient food or insufficient healthy food and compromised in what they were eating, and thus compromised in the situation of children. So I think we need to be very careful to monitor our birth weight indicators and to be paying attention to that first 1,000 days. The lockdown in some ways took up a good chunk of those first 1,000 days of development of a great many children. I also think we need to be thinking about pandemics that will come not only in the shape of children being undernourished, but also children and mothers who have been malnourished and have not been able to gain the micronutrients that they need. So I think we need to be vigilant about monitoring things such as vitamin A deficiency, anemia, and other deficiencies that in this period immediately following COVID, so that we can have better targeting of our limited public health resources to ensure that we are not jeopardizing the status of a generation of children. And the last, which I would be interested to understand better, is what happened during COVID for the epidemics of obesity and overweight, and particularly pre-adolescent obesity and overweight. That just brings me to a short discussion of South Africa, and I think this is a discussion that could apply to many other upper middle income countries and middle income countries in Africa. So in South Africa, we have about half of our population living below our national poverty line. That's an aspirational poverty line. It's relatively high compared to other parts of Africa. But what we also have is 25% of our population, about 14 million people living below our food poverty line. And that is a very basic poverty line. That's effectively the same as the $1.90 line that is used by institutions such as the World Bank. It's a staggering number for a country that is supposed to be as wealthy as South Africa. And it makes this country to be an outlier in terms of its wealth in relation to the extent and depth of extreme poverty. So indeed, if you were to take that number of people, you would find that South Africa then becomes one of the poorer countries in Africa rather than among the wealthiest. Again, it brings me back to my opening statements about inequality and how inequality then translates its way through not only income, but also power. The second issue to observe around South Africa is the importance of its double burden. So increasingly, across the world, we are talking about a double burden of malnutrition, sometimes a triple, sometimes a quadruple burden of malnutrition. But in this instance, the reference is towards the numbers of people that are undernourished, meaning they do not get enough calories, they do not get enough nutrients to live a healthy life, and those that are consuming empty calories and too many empty calories.
Sorry, Professor May, can I just give you just like 30 seconds to wrap up, just looking at time.
Thank you. So that double burden, I think, is something which we need to be thinking about, particularly for countries in Africa as they start to increase their incomes, but do not necessarily make progress with their food security status when we think about it in these broader terms. Thank you for that. Thank you for that giving me the opportunity for that short intervention.
Thank you, Professor May. I would like to ask you to look in the chat. There is a question for you, and if you can respond to Nganyezi Skakane. I would also, before I introduce our next speaker, thinking around the time that we have, can participants to this webinar please start to think around the demands, the strategies, and next steps that we have to be thinking about. So next we have Dania Jansen. Dania is a feminist activist in the rural parts of the Western Cape, a member of Maubuye Land Rights Forum, which advocates for the access to land for small-scale farmers and the rural poor to advance agroecology practice for food sovereignty. Dania, I hope I have pronounced your name correctly, and I apologize if I haven't. Sorry, just as you're coming in, please can we just remind participants to please mute your mics? Dania? Dania, I think you need to unmute. As we're struggling with Dania, Dania will come back to you in a minute, just after Lindo Gushe. I think just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Lindo Gushe to come in. Lindo Gushe is with Abahlali. I did not get I'm just trying to find your profile, Lindo Gushe. Lindo Gushe is the Kenana branch chairperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo and is a chairperson of the KZN interim youth structure. And he will be sharing with us a little bit from the work that they have been doing during the COVID crisis, but linking it to experiences of hunger in communities, both before and during the COVID, during COVID. Lindo Gushe?
Hi everyone. As mentioned, my name is Lindo Gushe from Abahlali Basemjondolo movement, South Africa. I'm also a Kenana chairperson. So please forgive me. I've been in and out due to network problems. So here in Kenana, firstly, we are a branch under Abahlali Basemjondolo. So what we are doing here, what we have is we are about 101 families. What we have here, we have a communal garden where we planted our spinach. We just harvested beans where we managed to make or to make over 80 kg. But our businesses have helped us a lot as a community, because we managed to make toilets. We managed to make sure that there is no one in our community that will go in bed with empty stomach. We also have poultry, so that's how we're using our land. So as a movement of Abahlali Basemjondolo, we always advocate for those people who have no land to have access to land, because there's a huge gap between those who have land and those who have not land. I was seeing the the percentage that for those who owns land, and what we are experiencing or what we are seeing is that those who have land before 1994, they still have more land. Like whites, they owned more than 72%, followed by coloureds who owned 14%, followed by Indians who owned 5%, and followed by Africans. And Africans in South Africa, they are the majority, but they only own 4%. So there have been no redistribution of land in South Africa. So as Abahlali Basemjondolo, we make sure that we protect those people who have no access in land near the city. Just like us in Kenana, we were evicted repeatedly by the eThekwini municipality. They said we have no right to stay within the city, but through to Abahlali Basemjondolo, they help us to remain here in Kenana. So this is another way of us as a movement to make sure that we enable those people who have no land or who have no access to land to have land. We have more than 80,000, 150,000 now. They have place called home. For before 1913, just like here in South Africa.
Can we just ask everyone who's not speaking to...
For those they were represented to experience to go to be slaves for others to make sure that we
Apologies, everyone. It seems that we may have lost Lindo Guhle. Lindo Guhle, are you still with us? Okay. As Lindo Guhle tries to rejoin us, these are sometimes the challenges that activists face on the ground. Hello. Sorry, who's saying hello?
It's me, Dinia.
Okay, Dinia. Okay, we will let you go ahead and speak now that we can hear you, because we have just lost Lindo Guhle. Go ahead, Dinia. And then can I just ask everyone, other than the person speaking, can we also try and have our videos off so that we may help with bandwidth for the conversation to be able to go forward?
Thank you, everyone. Good day, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of this important conversation. and it's a conversation that are very close to my rural heart. If I can start by making one statement, without land and water and seeds, we are mainly in trouble if we don't have access to the free things that will make a food system or develop a food system that can create a new moment for poor people to have access to nutritional food and access to enough food. But also if women are being kept out of the loop and being excluded from access to land, we will also be in trouble. And our dream or our objective to build a food system that are beneficial for poor people, I think we have to do much more to get access for women to land. We live in a country where 17 million people are dependent on the social grant. And some of these people are actually women and children who are dependent on the social grant. They are already under so much pressure. During COVID-19, we have experienced that the COVID relief that they give to people, the 350, wasn't even enough to feed our family. But still the government thought this could be enough for a family. We work in communities where people on an everyday basis experience hunger. Those are working on the farms, those are actually working the land, and also are working with the produce. They don't have access to food, and they are the ones who still going hunger to bed. With the unemployment rate of 42%, but also the future coming blood path of job losses. Yes, we certainly need a food system that are working for us, that are building for by communities, but also for communities. If we look in the Western Cape perspective, where farm workers are on the farm, and if there's a eviction, or if you work, stay in a formal settlement, where if there's a eviction that your structure are demolished, but also then the actually thing, the food garden that you created for yourself to make sure that you have access to food are also destroyed by the law enforcement, by the farm owners. In one case, the farm owner used pesticides just to destroy the only food garden that the farm worker had. If you stay close to let's say a tomato plantation, and you go and pick some of the fruits of the tomatoes, then you've been killed for it. So in what societies do we actually live? In the commercial farmers with the bulk of the land, and small-scale farmers have no access to land, especially community land that are earmarked for small-scale farmers to practice agroecology, but also to have this access to land that can secure livelihoods. And if the Western Cape perspective are that we are surrounded by so many wine farms, that how many wine can you actually drink? And these wine are for export. It's not to feed a nation or to feed poor people. So for many years, our demand is Rural Women's Assembly in Yanda as the national movement. The fact that one woman, 1 hectare could help to sustain livelihoods, could help to give people better access to food and nutritional food. If we want a food system that we I don't know how to put it, but if we want a food system, I think we need access to seeds, access to seed banks, and this is what we do in Yanda and Rural Women's Assembly, to have this local seed banks, the local food gardens, the local markets. We need more access to local markets even, but also the access to water. In many cases we have land, but there's no water. So how do we build around these important things like how to protect our seeds? And these are the measures that we put in place in the Rural Women's Assembly and in Yanda to put in place the seed banks where we can protect our indigenous seeds, that we don't have to work with GMO seeds. The only thing that was really cheap during COVID-19 was maize. If you go in the store, it's on special. So the only excess in people have bought it because they don't have a choice. And I think the only thing that we are left now is people's will to survive another day. Because hunger are so violent. I just asked yesterday to our deputy minister, how can you go to bed? How can you put your head down while you know so many families are food insecure in this country? So many families. You are going to take away the 350 grand that you is a COVID relief. I can just see more families go food insecure after this. But the COVID-19 impact will stay with us for many years. After COVID, we will still feel the impact of that. We will still have a growing hunger in communities. We will still have a growing poverty that are deep-rooted into rural communities, also urban communities.
Anya, sorry, can I just ask that you take the next 30 seconds to wrap up? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we need strategies to make these food system that we want to build. We need strategies, and we need it now. And the only thing I can think we can do this is to pull together all forces in civil society. And we don't have to look very far for it. I remember my grandfather was a great farmer, and the way he shared his produce, but also share his knowledge, indigenous knowledge. This is how we could go into build a great and a vibrant food system for poor people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dania. So Lindo Buhle is back with us, or I do hope that they are still with us. So we would like to give Lindo Buhle another 3 to 4 minutes to just wrap up what they were sharing with us. Lindo Buhle, are you with us? Okay, I think they may have fallen off again, which is a real pity, but this is sadly some of the realities of organizing in various different parts of the country where you have various different kinds of technological challenges within South Africa, especially when we are having these conversations on platforms such as Zoom. We will open the floor for a few questions. I do see that we have had some comments around what some of the demands and strategies and next steps can be. I will take time to read them through just after. If we have any hands, I'd like to take some hands, and then I will read the comments. Do we have hands? Okay. So I'm going to read the comments which have been coming through. I will start with Carmen's comment. In South Africa, the challenge of strengthening local markets, providing good and nutritious food is very important, not just for small-scale producers, but also for rural and urban consumers. Only the upper classes can access good, locally produced food. We need local, popular food markets. Thank you, Dania, for highlighting this need. And then we have a comment from a journalist, which I would like to pose which is posed to the presenters. It says, "Good day, my name is Sianda, Farmers Weekly journalist. I was wondering if our speakers can help explaining why is it that food produced in rural areas and yet is produced in rural areas, yet it is rural people that don't have access to safe and nutritional foods. Is there something that producers can do, those who are closer to these communities?" I think part of Dania's presentation alluded to that. Lindo Bush, I see you're back with us as well. If in your wrapping up, you could also touch on the question that has been asked. And then I'm going to give a couple of final minutes to Dania and Lindo Gushe to make comments, and then open the floor yet again so that we can start to really think about what are the opportunities on the way forward. Go ahead, Lindo Gushe. You need to unmute, Lindo Gushe.
Oh, yes, thank you. Once again, please forgive me for network problems. So for me, firstly, for me, for this conversation we are having, it's very fruitful because it shows really that something happens in people's mind. We are starting to realize something. Actually, we are on the right path. This is how the capitalist world or the capitalists have caught us because like seriously, there's no reason for me to work for someone, to be forceful, working for someone 6 hours a day or 12 hours, not having a say in the profit. If I have something to eat, but we don't have land, we can't grow our own food. So planting our own food, it's the way. So just like here in South Africa, there's Section 24 that says everyone has a right to shelter or to house. But we as Abahlali baseMjondolo, we say if we have a right to house, there must be we need to the Constitution must also state that everyone has a right to land, so that if we all have a right to land, we can do what we are talking about. So just like here in Kenya, since we have land, we also have shelters. We also use our land. So as we have a garden, as we have poultry, we are also able to expand, to do another things. But what is important is what you are doing in the garden, because no one goes in bed with empty stomach. So as we know that we can't owe a stomach. So this is the first step to be free. So as we are doing this, because we also share a good relationship with MST. So MST is one of those places we also look up to. We practice what they do. Of attacks from the state. They sent anti-land invasion units and Calvins and family security to destroy what we are doing. I remember in other day they came and destroy our food in the garden. where they destroy our spinach, even our beans. So what we are doing to the states, it's like it's a problem, or we're anti-government, but we see this as a way as another way of meeting the government. So we can't depend on the government. We can't depend on social grants. There are those people who can't who are not social grant recipients. So this, what we are doing, we are meeting government in halfway, but unfortunately the government, they don't see this as well as us. So they think we are anti-government. They think there's a third hand in what we are doing. But we know that for them to oppose what we are doing, capitalists, they are behind, because they don't want us to own something or to produce. They want us to always remain the consumers. So I just want to say thank you. From it's very difficult to catch up where we are due to the network problems, but I'm enjoying what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindo Buhle. So I am going to give time in the last few minutes of the discussion for all our speakers to make contributions. But as we have been requesting, if we do have hands for people who have questions to pose to any of our speakers, please do go ahead. But as we're thinking about way forward, we're thinking about strategies, can we think about what are our messages to government, what are our messages to commercial farmers, big companies, and other powerful actors? And then also how and what are the opportunities for all of us to move forward and mobilize in our communities, in broader society in South Africa? How do we link together in working together to ensure that there is solidarity, not only in South Africa, but across the continent and also in globally, which is why we felt it was important that we give all these perspectives as we think about the right to food. I see Sianda from Farmers Weekly again has a question to Joe Mzinga. Is there a way of using agroecology together with industrial agriculture, or rather, how can small-scale farmers use both of these together? And if you can give an example. So, Joe, when you're coming in to give your last remarks, please can you also keep that in mind? We have had some of our speakers leave, unfortunately. So Wayne has a question around linking to Dania's talk to the previous webinar presentation by Admaya Nyamawanza on climate change in South Africa. With decreasing rainfall and increasing temperatures, there are severe environmental challenges going forward, especially for resource poor people. Any suggestions of on being prepared for these? So these are just some of the questions in the chat box that our speakers can address. And then just trying to see if there's anything else. So I'm going to, because we are at 22, I am going to give some time for all of our speakers who are still present to just come in. Please, can you just raise your hand if you're still present as a speaker, and then I can just call you to come in. And if you can, consider the questions that have been posed in the chat box. Joe, are you, okay, Dania, your hand is up, go ahead. We'll start with Dania, and then after Dania, we will have Joe.
Yeah, I will wrap up by saying that the question of water are so important if we want to spearhead a good food system. As my Boyan in Yanda and Rural Women's Assembly, we inspire people to plant their gardens wherever they are available land. A small house garden are not enough. We need access to bigger land. We need access to that community land that are holding by municipalities and leased by the municipalities to commercial farmers for 100 years. And for us, small scale farmers, you get only a lease of 5 years or 3 years. So I think it's so unfair, and we need to push these municipalities to let go of the community lands. But also, the reason I think why we as rural people not have the real access to land is because we are on small or on private land. We can't just use the land to plant because it's not our land, it is private land. And the Constitution protects these ones who have the private land. So, but also my big push will be to push government to realize that if one woman can have 1 hectare of land, it could really make a difference in the rural areas, in urban areas. It could keep hunger out of our doorsteps. We have to make them realize that. And when that happens, I think we have a great future in communities. We will never have a child or a woman going hungry to bed in the evening. So this is my closing remarks. I think the question of the basic income is also important for us to keep on campaigning for this, because this is the only access to food. That will be a great access to food for poor people. There will be money in their hands they can buy, and they can also plant, they can buy good seeds, GMO seeds, GMO-free seeds, sorry, to plant and to do agri-ecology as a way to enhance the future of all of us who are landless on this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dania. We're going to have Joe Mzinga come in with his last comments and also answering the questions which were posed directly to him. And then after Joe, we will have Patricia also come in. Joe?
Yes, thanks very much, moderator. I think the comments from Sianda in terms of having the two systems working together is quite difficult. It's quite difficult in the sense that agroecology really takes care of the earth, takes care of the soil, takes care of the ecosystem, and takes care of the food that is produced. And if you look at the industrial agriculture, is heavily dependent on chemical input, which are externally, and they are not regenerative, and they are killing even the soil, so to speak, destroying water down the stream, and in terms of the ecosystem. So it's very challenging. And apart from that one is also causing a kind of cross-pollination. So that's why we are very concerned that at the end of the day, we really have all to run to the monoculture system that is very dependent and that is very expensive for farmers to produce. So we are sticking, and to say that we can have also at the large scale in terms of agroecology. We have seen in many countries looking at the movement, particularly in Latin America, but also in Spain, where the movement is much more stronger. So the agroecology is contrary really to the industrial agriculture, and moving forward is a challenge. Maybe probably we can have a system whereby we have, particularly on cash crops, doing industrial agriculture, and particularly leaving a certain place for agroecology. And my take home, or the issue that I would like to emphasize here, is in terms of the putting farmers, all the movements in working in the policy frameworks, not really outside, because that's where we have to be on the table and influence policies, not outside. We have to be there where decisions are being taken place, where the budget is being discussed, and where plans are being discussed, including the national plans, the provincial plans, regional plans, and even the global plans. because that's where we can put our voice across and put our requirement across and continue advocating for the same even after the plans and policies are in place. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. So we're going to have Patricia next after Joe, and then Linda Guse, and then Sagari. Can we also get closing remarks from you? So just in that order, Patricia, Linda Guse, and then Sagari.
Thank you, Nandi. In my concluding remarks, I will say that as civil society, and especially as women's rights organizations, we should continue to push our governments to ensure that policy responses consider women's roles in agri-food systems and ensure that their multiple needs as guardians of household food security, as food producers, farm managers, etc., are adequately addressed. We should also continue to push government to ensure that special stimulus facility is set up solely for smallholder farmers with a quota to rural women farmers and also our women fishers to enable them access financial credit at a very flexible and low interest rates with extended moratorium. And finally, I'll say that as civil society and as women rights organizations, we should continue to claim and create spaces, our own spaces, to ensure that we promote and protect women's livelihoods. And also during this pandemic, we push for our governments to ensure that we promote a dignified life for women farmers and women fishers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Linda Guse, your closing remarks?
For my closing remarks, what I can say that for those who are able to organize platform like this, they must carry on. We also have a duty to make sure that we make agriculture fashionable, since agriculture is being demonized with malicious intentions by the capitalist. So we must make sure that we clean the name of agriculture, because most of us, we think agriculture is something out of fashion. So we must make sure that everyone, especially those who are like us, who have nothing, who are the poorest, we must conscientize them about the importance of agriculture, the importance of growing our own food, because this food we are buying from the big names, it have a lot of chemicals which lead us to get easily ill. So we must make sure that everyone is aware and everyone must love agriculture, because this is the starting point to free ourselves from this ruthless way of doing things by the capitalists. So I just want to say thanks a lot for inviting me. I've gained a lot today. So I encourage anyone to make sure that we continue this conversation, even in our homes and even in our neighbors. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Linda Guse. Sagari, you are going to lead us towards the end. And we have a little bit of a burden for you in sharing with us, based on what you've heard today, what are some of the lessons that you think that we can take forward in the South African context, across Africa, from your experiences in India, so that people can really begin to come together and think about what is needed for solidarity, what is needed for action. I mean, some of the things that we have been talking and thinking about regarding the right to food is litigation, and we are working on campaigns and campaigns in South Africa, what lessons can we take from you? As Ruth has shared in the chat, we do meet on Thursdays at 2 p.m. To connect and see what are the opportunities for litigation in South Africa. You can connect with us through the C19 Food Working Group, Inyanda, Cry of the Excluded, UPM, and other movements. Sagari?
Thank you, Nandi. And I think in my concluding remarks, I'll also try to respond to a question which just came here about the Right to Food campaign and the opportunities of the Food Security Act in India and what it does, whether it is an opportunity. I would say that it all boils down to what is the political will. And the situation in India is that our context today is the political will is far from really seeing that Food Security Act as a democratic way of people taking control of how and where that food is going to come from. Because clearly there is a space, if there is backed by political will, that there would be localized, decentralized ways where your food culture, where small marginal landless, first of all, land to the landless. I mean, you can't be talking about food security without land to the landless, and that calls for a real structural revolution here. We're talking about that. Having said that, there is, of course, space for having this systems whereby food is then reorganized. The system of food is reorganized so that food is central and money is not central. Today, it's the economy of money which drives where you get your food. And the pandemic is really showing that the economy of money is imploding on its head. We have people who are, there is no way this capitalist system, the capitalist system is going to only survive by greater and greater exploitation. So it's the political will. It's about, yes, you have an act and a legislation, and yet if the political will is not going to be back this kind of democratic system of taking back control of food, why doesn't it back it? Because it is not, its class interests are going to be affected. And that is the issue we need to really be addressing today. And that's why, coming to litigations, I can only share from you from India today that our institutions, every institution has been taken over by a right-wing fascist force, which has absolutely no intentions of delivering any kind of justice. And therefore, my one, I think, a lesson which I think from any movements across the world today, we need to be really conscious and really be aware that the political governance of where we are living today is not the same, I think it's at a very different situation from, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We need to recognize that we need to be strategizing very differently. And I'm honestly, I would love to learn more about the political context in South Africa and Africa, but just going by the way dictatorships and fascist rulers are coming in, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Turkey, whether it's India, this is the reality that we cannot, it's not just business as usual. When all your democratic institutions are being taken over, the question we really need to be addressing is, where do you place your efforts? Your efforts of campaigning and litigation versus your efforts of organizing and building the force and the base of people's power and I won't go back into defining who the people are, but I think we really have to be very realistic and very, very conscious as to that locationality in this moment of history, that it is no longer just about placing demands to a government. Yeah. So I would say that we have that is learning. I think it's very, very necessary that in this kind of context that conversations are very important, these kinds of conversations on, and how do we ensure, because I don't know how it is again in Africa, but in India what's happened is there's a passivity which has come in, right? That your ruler who you elect into power, somewhere we think that parliamentary democracy has provided us therefore the power to really design and define what's happening, but parliamentary democracy today is itself constricted and controlled by the powers who are defending their class interests and their caste interests. and their gender, and so therefore I think that it really calls the opportunity today, which I see, is that how do we as movements really deepen these conversations within our own constituencies, build the bridges, really bring out and unwrap those areas where we assume we agree. There's a lot of assumption that we all agree on everything, but let's unpack those. Let's structurally unpack those. And I think that is the only way that we can bring in new strategies and tactics. I mean, today, even the term agroecology, for instance, has been hijacked by World Bank, by all the corporate forces. I mean, we have a huge agroecological program in India, which is being driven by corporations. So we need to be extremely, I would say we have to be very, very highly much more politically conscious as to what is structurally what is going on. And within that, therefore, how do you then strategize? Because our words are already being hijacked and being used by the other forces. In India, the fascist regime is talking about organic farming, right? But their vision of organic farming is pushing their cultural ideology on all of us. It's about, you can only have a cow, you cannot eat beef, all right? And those are cultural ideological issues which we here are dealing with. And that's why I say it's important at this moment that we need to really go back to the roots of where we are, recognize our reality, and then organize around that. Thank you very much for this amazing opportunity to learn from all of you. And I think that building these solidarity conversations even across, I know we're thousands of miles away, but it's the same global forces which are really pushing out the struggling people away from the means of production and producing food. And as I loved what Lindo said, as just continuing to be consumers, as long as we still have to keep buying our food and not being right there in the center of where our food is produced and how do we then distribute it through solidarity markets, I think that that's where the conversation has to go. Thanks all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sagari. I would like to thank all our co-hosts, which is PLUS, the Center for Excellence in Food and Security from UWC, the C19 People's Coalition Food Working Group. I would like to give special thanks to all our speakers who across time zones have made today possible. Without all of you, this conversation would not have happened. I'd like to thank all our guests who have stayed with us these 2 hours, our guests who are listening in on Facebook. Thank you very much for coming and spending the afternoon with us. I'd like to remind everybody of our hashtags as we leave the conversation. It's hashtag World Food Day, hashtag WFD 2020, hashtag African Food Systems, hashtag Right to Food. Really look forward to connecting with everybody on how do we continue this work. This is just but the beginning through this conversation, but now the real work begins where we come together as movements, as communities, as organizations to really do the work that needs to be done so that people within communities in all of our countries really get to realize the right to food. Thank you, everyone.